My next guest has forgotten more about Mike Madigan than the rest of us will ever know. He wrote a terrific political biography of Mike Madigan, The House That Madigan Built. I'm sure it will come with a new addendum soon, and then probably yet an additional one coming up late next year, perhaps. Ray Long from the Chicago Tribune, investigative reporter, two-time Pulitzer Prize finalist, and he's been digging into Mike Madigan's career and life for decades at this point. Ray, welcome back. How are you, sir?
Great to be here, John. Thank you.
Ray, the conviction of former Madigan longtime chief of staff, Tim Mapes, exposed more than just the extraordinary set of lies that he tried to tell to protect his boss and even his former boss. But out of all this entire trial, which is a relatively simple trial, what was the most surprising nugget or revelation that you discovered?
Well, it was just astonishing, John, that they actually did not ask Mapes anything of substance about the alleged crimes that Mike Madigan is charged with in the racketeering case that comes up next April. Madigan and his longtime confidant, Michael McLean, are charged in that case. And Mapes was a guy who was described as the third point on the triangle, with Madigan at the apex, McLean on the other side, and Mapes there as the power structure that controlled legislation and the politics of the House Democrats and overall Democratic efforts in Illinois. So that was a fairly well described and distinguishing quality here. And they just really shredded every one of his excuses for the various lies that he told. John, another thing that came out when they had the jury and the jury came out with its verdict, they had 7 check marks by the perjury count for the 7 alleged lies that he told to a grand jury, and they checked each of the 7 boxes. They only needed to check one to show that he lied and make him guilty, but they checked all 7. And then with the attempted obstruction of justice charge, they checked another dozen boxes. So they didn't put any stock in his defense and threw him out with a couple of guilty verdicts in less than 5 hours.
So the memory expert that the defense presented to the jury had no effect?
Apparently not. And the memory expert they brought in had never testified in court before, and she had to testify to that. And she also testified that she didn't examine Mapes and that she'd only met him briefly the day before she testified. So it just did not add up, and it was an insurmountable case. It was very hard for Mapes to come up with something that could really overthrow the amount of evidence they had. He would come, they would play the tape. They played the entire grand jury tape, which lasted about 2 hours during the trial. And this jury that judged him heard it all. They requested their own copies of the testimony back in the jury box. That's probably why it took 5 hours. They had to ask for that, and they also went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and they just could not find any other reason to support any of his arguments.
Talking to Ray Long, Chicago Tribune investigative reporter. Read his piece today. And the book is terrific, The House That Madigan Built. I wanted you to elaborate for my audience. Apparently, shortly after the feds started to get involved, and not necessarily with this, it didn't really have anything to do with Mapes, just a couple weeks after they were involved kind of in an ancillary case, Mapes was asked to meet with an FBI analyst and special agent just from the Springfield Bureau, just to give her some background on public corruption in Illinois. And when he went to meet with her, wasn't it one of your stories that he carried with him on the front page of the Tribune And at that point, he thought, uh-oh, something may be going on. And that's when he finally called and alerted Madigan's other people to the potential that the feds may be listening?
Yeah, that's basically it, John. He had, when he was talking to folks, he had a copy of a story about Danny Solis, who was the 25th Ward alderman who cut a deal with the feds and wore a wire for a lot of these investigatory tapes and secret recordings that have popped up in the Burke case, the Alderman Ed Burke case, corruption coming up later this year, and the Madigan case, of course. And so, oddly enough, it looked like from the description that was testified to by an FBI agent from Springfield that she knew him because they'd met before at like a local funeral in Springfield, and she thought, well, maybe he's a good guy to reach out to and ask about public corruption going on in the State House. And Mapes said something to the effect of he thought that they wanted him to wire up on General Assembly members. Now, that was not fleshed out in the trial, but apparently that was going on in an unrelated fashion while they were up here in Chicago digging in and trying to wire up other people. And so it seemed like the two were not coordinated, the downstate FBI and the upstate FBI.
Yeah,
at least that's the impression they left.
That was the ComEd bribery trial investigation that was starting there.
Yeah.
And the FBI agent said, I had no idea. I literally, I wasn't, this wasn't me trying to sting him or catch him, but he smelled something apparently, and he called Sheldon Zenner, Madigan's criminal defense attorney, which I guess he was in place because of the Madigan office sex scandal, and that kind of started the entire the entire Mapes involvement. Now, would Mapes have been drawn into this had he not been fired as chief of staff? Probably, right?
Well, you would think that he would be quizzed by the federal agents because they were investigating Madigan during the time period that Mapes was there. So he left in a sex scandal of his own, sexual harassment scandal,
right.
In 2018. Remember, John, the ComEd investigation went from 2011 to 2019. So it would be natural that he would have been reached out to and quizzed about that investigation, too.
So he gets sentenced in January. It could be 25 years. He's 69 years old. Just knowing what you know about what twisted webs we weave, what do you think he is going to do? He was offered immunity once before, lied to the grand jury, had that rescinded. Do you expect him to become a prosecution witness in April, or does he keep his mouth shut?
Well, he may be able to help them out if he wants to, and he wants to try to lower his sentence by offering them some behind-the-scene information that they could verify elsewhere. But if the feds used him on the stand, the defense, Madigan's people who are defending him and McLean's people who are defending McLean would have to obviously, John, say, weren't you just convicted of perjury? Didn't you lie before a grand jury when you had immunity? That's a pretty high bar to try to overcome if you put a guy like that on the stand.
I asked your buddy, Mr. Meisner, this last week, and others too. Boy, the patient zero for all of these sort of Venn diagrams of different corruption cases tends to be Solis, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. Danny Solis played a major role in this, and that's one of the reasons he got such a sweet deal himself. He does not appear to be headed toward prison himself, even though they caught him with a variety of alleged crimes. They still haven't charged him, and they don't plan to, it appears to me. And so he traded off and got wired up as a result. And those wiretaps have turned into quite a gold mine for the feds.
When do we get to hear all the wiretaps, to quote Blago? When can we hear all the tapes?
Well, amazingly, because Mapes lied about some of the basic things about Madigan and Mapes' relationship, the feds had to roll out a lot of tapes that they had that really kind of helped give an autopsy of the beginning of the end of the Madigan reign in Springfield. But you have to know, when they've got thousands of tapes from 9 months of Mike McLean's telephone calls, that they are still loading up the gun for the Madigan-McLean trial in April of next year.
And do you have to keep writing afterwards to your book?
I'm going to have to do something here. We're still trying to figure out whether there's a whole new book in the offing or whether there's a few more chapters to add. Yeah,
this is going to be 2 volumes. This is going to be up to the trial. You mean the house that Madigan built, and then you're going to have to do an entire book after all these trials are in the rearview mirror. You're going to have to.
I may need you to negotiate that for me, John. We'll see.
Be happy to do that, sure. I mean, it's a great product. As I told my audience, you've forgotten more about Mike Madigan than the rest of us will ever know.
Well, thank you, John. I tell you what, I've been out there trying to follow the truth for a long time, and not everybody has the time or ability, but it's our job as journalists to be watchdogs, and that's what we've been trying to do.
And the Burke trial also has to do with the Chinatown deal, the aborted Chinatown deal, right?
Yeah, there's a tangent into that too, but it's also the one main thing that they've got in that trial is kind of a basic Chicago shakedown, where he's trying to get some business from fast food restaurant,
right. Just get the parking lot changed.
Yeah.
I know somebody who was involved in the real estate business that Ed Burke tried to shake down, and he walked away from the table, said, "I'll build it in Rosemont. No thanks."
No, yeah. Well, that is the price of corruption.
Mm-hmm. Ray Long, thank you very much. Appreciate it, sir. We'll read more in tomorrow's Chicago Tribune.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Good to be here.
Take care. Here is McLean explaining what he has to do, and you'll hear Mapes at the end of this portion here.
And then I got to tell him that he's got to move on. He has no future in the house.
Will you be wearing your big boy pants that day?
And here is McLean telling Lou Lang, "You've got to go."
So this is no longer me talking. I'm an agent, somebody that cares deeply about you, who thinks that you really ought to move on.
And this is Lou Lang saying, "Oh."
And I would never embarrass him that way, although I must say I do believe that all of that is bullshit. But in the environment in which we are today, it doesn't really matter if it's bullshit or not.